All right, welcome back to Problem Solver Politics. I'm your host, Cardon Ellis, with Cody the Oracle.
Hey, everyone.
And today we're going to dive into a really interesting article by Inquisitor.com talking about Andrew Yang's support, well, actually, those who support Andrew Yang's UBI, or the Freedom Dividend, and what demographics support it, mostly Democrats, voters under 40, and earners under $50,000, and how this informs his candidacy and what implications it has for him moving forward towards the September debates. Now, we're really excited to do this, I am at least, because the Inquisitor article specifically cites an Echelon Insights study that was done recently with a pretty large sample size of about 1,006 people. And Echelon Insights is an intriguing company. If you're not familiar with it, I suggest you look them up. It's run by this young woman, Kristen Soltis Anderson, who actually we hope to have on our Problem Solver Politics terrestrial radio program on Sundays. She has done amazing work on trying to figure out who millennials are, what they think as the largest voting bloc. We actually still don't know millennials as well as we do Gen Z, baby boomers, the greatest generation, so on and so forth. She's done phenomenal work on polling data amongst millennials and written several really just like spot on and amazing books. If you're not familiar with it, you have to check them out. So anyway, back to this Inquisitor article. It talks about who supports the UBI. And this is important because you guys might remember about a month ago, we did a podcast on who Andrew Yang needs to win over. What are his blind spots moving forward? They're always talking about lanes that candidates have in these elections. And just like you're driving on the highway and you got a blind spot, a candidacy might have a blind spot. And fortunately, math can actually help us out a lot with this. And Mr. Silver over at 538 is a data guy just like me, and he's got
Mr. Silver now. I see. He's moved up from Nate to Mr. Silver.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Sorry. Hey Nate. Anyway, Mr. Silver, the curator of 538, has made a really good infographic that we referenced last month showing where Andrew Yang's support comes from. His flagship policy is the UBI, which is what he's most known for, and this shows how people react to it. And you'll notice that he is killing it with Hispanic/Asian Americans, crushing it with millennials. In fact, millennials are his highest support group, and the left, whatever that means, according to Mr. Silver, is his third highest support group. But his least supportive group are party loyalists, a.k.a. the establishment, you know, those people that were shutting off the microphone during the NBC debates, and black voters. He actually hasn't been able to dig into the black vote, which to me also is part of party loyalists, though, because 84% of African Americans are registered Democrats, which I think, and they have been for 40 years now. So I think if that's not the definition of party loyalist, I don't know what is. So basically, he really struggles with the establishment. He's doing great with the young people. So anyway, let's dive right in to the Echelon Insights study here. Cody, what was the first thing that kind of popped into your mind when you were reading this Inquisitor article and the Echelon Insights study that it cited?
Well, the biggest thing that jumps out at you, obviously, and just from reference to this and to Andrew Yang especially, is one second, I want to get this set up correctly for you guys so you guys can read it. They asked people basically, a proposal has recently been made for a universal basic income, a government payment of $1,000 per month to every American adult. Payment will be made regardless of one's work status or any other factor. Do you favor or oppose? Obviously, basically, Andrew Yang's UBI pitch. Registered voters as a whole, 40% favor, 43% opposed. So, I mean, a toss-up, not literally 50-50, but you understand. I mean, it's right there. They're both there on both ends. Independents definitely seem to be a little bit more favorable than the GOP voters are. Our registered Republican voters have a 67 to 22% opposed to favor rating. But what's interesting is when you get to this last one, this third line down here, I'm sorry if you can't read, it's the Democrat voters. When you look at registered Democratic voters, 53% favor to only 26% that oppose. And what's even more kind of fascinating to me, there's 21% unsure and 26% that oppose. So almost as many people don't know as oppose to this thing, which is a little bit unique.
And that actually was one of the biggest things that popped out to me. I read all the data on the Echelon Insights study, and my first two impressions were, wow. There's definitely age gaps in how people respond to socialism versus capitalism, because interestingly enough, on the very first page of the Echelon Insights study, they actually polled capitalism versus socialism, and capitalism leads socialism 48% to 15% in a head-to-head pull off, shall you say, about what is the best system. And oftentimes people struggle to explain the UBI or the freedom dividend. They try and put it into conveniently labeled boxes that they already understand, and it's not a socialist giveaway. The UBI was actually proposed by Milton Friedman back in the 60s, okay, as the negative income tax. And he's about as libertarian. I mean, he was sitting right on at the right hand of Ronald Reagan at half of these economic summits, okay? So oftentimes when you look at these studies, people will reject anything that sounds like a giveaway because especially the older people have a knee-jerk reaction to the word socialism, which is understandable because socialists imprisoned my grandfather in Cuba for being a journalist under Batista and sentenced him to death before he escaped to Miami. Oh yeah, and my other grandpa escaped the National Socialists in Warsaw, Poland, before fleeing to fascist Italy and Spain, being imprisoned there before he could go and fight with the Polish Brigade during the Battle of Britain. So it's totally understandable that the 65 and up crowd is kind of knee-jerking against this because they don't really know how to interpret it other than through the lens of the capitalist versus socialist argument. So it seems like Andrew Yang has a lot of work to do in terms of educating people as to what the UBI is and how a VAT tax could pay for it, and especially how he could close a lot of the other gaps in terms of the economy that would allay these people's fears. And then actually show that, hey, I'm a pragmatist, because his border policies are right up there with anybody that's concerned about illegal immigration. His entrepreneurship policies are right up there with anybody that's all about free market capitalism and entrepreneurship. So if it's all right with you, can we just dive into the Echelon Insight study?
Yeah, well, we have been, man. We've been going through it.
Oh, I was reading actually stats that the Inquisitor article had cited. But
oh no, yeah, I was throwing up showing everyone what shows up on the
awesome.
The actual study itself. Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting that 48 to 15% capitalism leads socialism in a head-to-head pull-off, and that there's large age gaps on socialism. If you look at the 65 and up crowd, 8% think socialism's better. Meanwhile, 71% think capitalism's better. But then once you start hitting the 30 to 39-year-olds and the 18 to 29-year-olds, here on page 4, you see that it goes down to 26%, literally like less than a third.
The biggest takeaway from those two age brackets, though, really up till the 50s, is that a majority of people are unsure. A majority of people don't know what's better capitalism. I think that's the bigger takeaway.
Yeah,
which,
it shows a removal from the struggles against it.
But I would say even bigger so that's an honest answer. Yeah, you ask your average person, what's better? So that's like, I don't know. Yeah. I'm not an economist. Like, yeah. I maybe prefer, what's better? You know, it's a tough question.
And it confirms Ben Shapiro's theory that one of the worst things for America was the fall of the Berlin Wall. Not because capitalism won, but because it took away a common enemy from the American people. And when they no longer had a common enemy, they started becoming fractious and you know, eating their own.
What about Al-Qaeda, man? Who's pro-Al-Qaeda in America?
I don't think anybody is questioning whether or not Al-Qaeda offers a better economic system. The Cold War was the classic passion play, a standoff between two polar opposites, socialism and capitalism, whereas Al-Qaeda is asymmetric warfare. You have organized official militaries fighting disorganized, actually I shouldn't say disorganized, but unofficial guerrilla armies. Okay,
yeah. Well,
so
speaking of this, 1 second, I want to go ahead. Speaking of age breakdowns,
if
you go to the breakdown by age for UBI by the voters,
yeah, that's what I want to jump
when
into.
Polled, really, it isn't until you get to the 50 to 64 bracket do you see it flip from more people favoring to opposing. So, I mean, but younger voters, when I say younger, I mean people under the age of 50, seem to generally favor the UBI as a plan moving forward. And I think it's really fascinating. And again, like we said, if we're talking about most Democratic registered voters, according to this poll, and most young Americans, young being under the age of 50, are support of one of his biggest platforms, I wouldn't be surprised if we would see him moving up in the polls. And actually, 1 second, I want to pull up one thing. It's just the Real Clear Politics aggregate. which has been following him for, not him, but every candidate and aggregating the results for the whole cycle. And when you look, Andrew Yang, the last few polls to come out, he hit 2% at the NBC News Wall Street Journal poll, 1% in the Economist YouGov poll, 3% in an Emerson poll, and then 1% in a political poll, less than 1% in an AB News, 1% in a Quitting Pack. But the last 3 ones to be released, 2%, 1%, 3%. So we actually can see him trending up. Again, still single-digit percents, but trending up as opposed to trending down.
Yeah, well, can you go to page 7? Because I would like to point out a flaw that I saw in this study. And Kristen Soltis Anderson, if you're listening, actually, if you're watching, listen up. I kind of had a little bit of a problem with this question because I don't think I would have reacted much differently than some of the people on the bars in this graph, because the question is, a proposal has recently been made for a universal basic income, a government payment of $1,000 per month to every American adult, period. This payment would be made regardless of one's work status or any factor. Do you favor or oppose this proposal? I'll tell you, if somebody were to call me and I weren't a podcaster who has dived into the nitty gritty of what a VAT tax is, how it's incorporated, the $168 billion that it claims to be able to raise, what it would cost to actually give 300 million people, or whatever it is, 200 million people that are actually adult citizens of this country, the UBI. If I hadn't known all of those details and I were just asked, hey, there's a proposal for universal basic income, regardless of work status or any other factor, do you oppose this proposal? I'd say, heck yeah. Sounds like a socialist handout. Whereas I think it would be better to have been worded.
Couldn't I argue that maybe, yes, I agree. Heck yeah, sounds like a socialist handout is a bad answer to most questions, because maybe, you should dig deeper
I think
and find out more about what they're actually asking you.
Well, yeah, but come on, that's not what you're doing when you're polling. You're trying to get over with. But
that is the universal part of universal basic income.
Okay, yes.
Regardless of anything, regardless of X, Y, and Z.
Yes, but it's a not fair question, and it's not fair to Andrew Yang.
It would be
look.
unfair.
I'm not fanboying Andrew Yang.
But
I'm saying
it's an unfair representation of UBI to leave that part out. That's a big distinction about UBI.
No, I get but I'm saying what's an even more unfair representation is saying they should have said a proposal has recently been made for a universal basic income paid for with a zero balance VAT tax, or there's no insinuation in this question that it can be paid for. So any rational person, when asked, hey, should everybody get a free $1,000 a month? Yeah, that'd be great, but how are you going to pay for it? The average person's natural intellectual defense mechanisms are going to kick in against the UBI along clear socialist versus capitalist lines, unless you actually say, hey, a proposal has been made that has a payment mechanism in order to function. So anyway, what it boils down to is it seems like he's making inroads. They're very small and they're incremental, but indeed they are inroads. And I hope to heaven that this is what the Democrats start talking about more instead of this crazy psycho SJW stuff. And I will point out something really interesting on the next page. After this page on the income levels of those that supported UBI, it also showed, I thought this was an interesting question they asked after the UBI question, it showed little support for Warren's proposal to break up big tech, with a plurality of Democrats opposed. Apparently Elizabeth Warren's idea to break up big tech tanked. And it did make me think, I just feel like I live in a little bit of a crazy clown world, because growing up, all the Democrats and all the liberals were against corporations and against big companies and against big techs and all about the little man and, screw the man, power to the people. And then now a plurality of Democrats are for corporatism. Like, no wonder Jimmy Dore's show is getting so many subscribers. And no wonder the anti-war people and the anti-corporatist people are so furious right now at the Democrat Party. It blew my mind and was hilarious looking at the measurable quantifiers that supported this, along with the vast majority of people that actually think social media bias is a huge problem. I took a lot of solace on page 10, realizing that most people, regardless of political stripe, seem to understand that social media is indeed biased and that that is indeed a problem. If our democracy is going to succeed, free speech numero uno in the Constitution has to be upheld. So anyway, we're going to link to this Echelon Insight study in the description below. If you guys can check it out, awesome. You know, it's going to blow your mind, a lot of the information that's in here. It's really good stuff. Also, like, share, and subscribe this video. It's getting increasingly hard to get content out there, especially political content, because post-adpocalypse, the algorithms aren't working as much in our favor for political content. So please, if you think this video was good and there's something good to say, like and share, and also keep those donations coming, and the hats are on order. We love you guys. You're a great fan base. Cody, you got anything you say before we close?
No, you covered it, man. That was really good. I
Okay.
approve of that message.
My name is Cody Como, and I approve of this message. This is Problem Solver Politics.